welcome, Elis. Thank you for joining Spaces. Looking forward to this discussion. And maybe we could start with you outlining the Alternative for Germany platform. What are the main goals you are pursuing? Where does Germany need change? And just to enlighten people who have never heard of Alternative for Germany or Alternative for Germany in German, since many people, especially in America, have never heard of Alternative for Germany, so that would be very helpful.
All right. Many thanks to Elon for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to openly discuss various issues. Let me check. Can you hear me? Great, thank you. Let's begin with who we are. Alternative for Germany is Alternative for Germany. It's a relatively new party founded 11 years ago during the Euro crisis. So unfortunately, when I shed light on our party, I have to start with rather negative circumstances in Germany. Our country is a great country with highly motivated people, but for the past 20 to 25 years, our country hasn't been governed quite properly. For 16 years, we had the administration of Angela Merkel, then the so-called traffic light coalition, which fell apart last year, and now we have elections. From my point of view, Angela Merkel is the first Green Chancellor. She basically destroyed our country. She made us open our borders to illegal immigration without asking the people. In 2015, she broke and destroyed our backbone. From the perspective of a terrible energy policy, for foreign listeners in this audience, Germany is the only industrial country that shut down its nuclear power plants. Therefore, Angela Merkel's goal was to implement only solar and wind energy. And you don't have to be very smart to understand that you can't run an industrial country solely on wind and solar, because you won't have energy or electricity when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. That's a big problem.
Yes, I mean, I'm a big fan of solar energy, but obviously if a country is at a very high latitude, the amount of solar energy in winter will be significantly less. And therefore, there is a significant difference in the day and night cycle of energy usage. So a lot of the energy can be done with solar power and with large-scale grid batteries, but it has to be supplemented by other types of energy. Because in the middle of winter in Germany, there isn't that much sunlight. So the solution obviously has to be multifaceted, where there are certainly renewable energy sources, but also that some amount of energy is necessary to pursue fossil fuels, especially nuclear, which I believe is highly underrated. I think it was a tragedy for Germany to shut down its nuclear power plants. In fact, they are very well designed, and I think the right step would be to significantly increase the number of nuclear power plants in Germany. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So that's why I wanted to shed light on the current situation to form an opinion about what our party stands for, because that's exactly what you said. We stand for the diversification of energy supply. We can't run an industrial country like Germany with a still strong manufacturing base. To be honest, our industrial production peaked in 2018 and has sharply declined since then due to high energy prices. And you can't run a country like that. So we say, listen, we need to be technologically open and we need to strengthen nuclear power plants again, because nuclear energy is carbon free, right? So we will also reduce carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere, which strangely enough are very, very high. And that's the irony of it all. Our governments, like the governments of Angela Merkel and the so-called ridiculous traffic light coalition, have imposed green policies on our country that don't work. We'd also like to return to technological openness.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, my recommendation, and I've already said this publicly, is that Germany should not so much restart its nuclear power plants as significantly increase electricity production. On the same site, that is, without significantly increasing the size of the nuclear power plants, without increasing the area they occupy, you can sharply increase the capacity of a nuclear power plant. Because the actual core part of the power plant is very small, people don't quite realize how small the central core of a nuclear power plant is. It's just amazingly tiny. And that's why on the same site, without increasing the area, you can sharply increase the amount of nuclear energy produced by any nuclear power plant. Do you need a water source to run the steam turbines? But in reality, you can produce much more energy than people think. And I think that a reasonable solution would be renewable energy sources, but with a lot more nuclear energy. And then, supplement it. There should be some amount of hydrocarbon generation to complement it.
Yes.
Yes, it just needs to be reasonable.
Yes, absolutely. But you know what? Let me give you another example. Because just like wind turbines, wind energy is extremely inefficient compared to nuclear energy, especially in terms of land use. Let me give you an example to shed some light on this. If you replaced one nuclear power plant, let's say, for example, the Emsland nuclear power plant in Germany, which produces 10 billion kilowatt hours of electricity per year, with modern wind turbines that generate only 8 million kilowatt hours per year, you would need 1,250 wind turbines to replace that power plant. And with rotor diameters of 70 meters and the minimum distance required between large wind turbines, you end up with about 100 square kilometers. For example, that's equivalent to half the area of a large city like Stuttgart, right? So all of this is just to emphasize once again that you don't have to be very smart to simply do your own calculations. But our energy policy.
Sorry, you think this is crazy. It's like a bunch of these energy issues. You don't have to be like the world's leading physicist. It's very basic math, less than middle school level, I would say. Even middle school math, it's very simple, not complicated.
Yes, of course. And then during a crisis, like during a war,
Please go ahead, excuse me.
during the war for Ukraine, our gas supplies were simply destroyed, and this really shed light on our strong dependence on Russian gas. Thank you. And do you know what the government decided during this crisis? When energy prices skyrocketed, after we were cut off from cheap energy supplies from Russia, they shut down the last nuclear power plant to create even more of an energy shortage. So either you are very stupid or you just hate your own country.
And ahead,
Isn't it?
I think that for the most part, these are very foolish people. I mean, there's an old saying that you should never attribute to malice what can be easily explained by incompetence.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So, well,
Yeah, I think so. When I saw that Germany was shutting down power plants after the gas supply from Russia stopped, I thought it was the craziest thing I had ever seen. Just at the moment when Germany needs electricity the most, Germany shuts down one of the best sources of electricity, nuclear energy.
and it's completely carbon free.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy.
Crazy. It's just crazy.
Yes. So I think to sum up, the two main things that AfP is striving to change are a sensible energy policy and a sensible immigration policy.
Yes, exactly.
So,
But even more. We would like me to continue a bit because right now it's a completely new situation for me that I can just have a normal conversation. And I'm not being interrupted or put in a negative light like it was in the media for the last 10 years, which is completely ridiculous. So what we stand for, since we are a conservative libertarian party, at least that's how we see ourselves. But in the mainstream media, we are portrayed extremely negatively as a so-called extremist party. That's why we simply say, listen, we need to reduce bureaucracy. We need to free our businesses, our companies, and individuals from this terrible bureaucracy. Do you know how much time, how many days it takes to get a business permit in Germany?
yes, I think so. Oh, yes.
Great plan, thank you. So how many days do you have already?
Yes, I got a car factory, not far, thank you, not far from Berlin. So we had a lot of problems. I mean, just to be clear, we actually had a lot of support, a lot of local support, a lot of local support from the local government and the national government. And despite all that support, there are just an enormous number of rules that, people in the government have to follow. It's just crazy. And we had to, I think, 25,000 pages, that was our permit, thank you, and it had to be printed in thousands. Yeah, but I think it's crazy in the end, 25,000, and then you have to make lots and lots of copies. So it was literally a truckload of paper. Because, of course, we can do it electronically. Isn't that better?
No, that's not possible. You need it on paper.
No, it must be paper. I'm losing it. It was just a few years ago. It's the recent past. I mean, we've made it a quarter of the way into the 21st century. It's like, guys, let's just have 25,000 real printed pages, and then I think every page should be stamped with a physical seal. I mean, that's going to really tire someone out. And yeah, they'll get a
lot of people.
Yeah, and they'll get repetitive stress injuries from having to stamp out stress injuries to send him to the hospital or somewhere else. I mean, is it like a truckload of paperwork? I'm not trying to blame the people who do this because they're just following the rules, so we need to change the rules. In my view, this applies to all countries, especially those long prosperous. It's extremely important to do what I call cleaning up the garbage, meaning reviewing rules and regulations and making sure they clearly bring real benefits. And if there is even the slightest doubt that they are beneficial, we should abolish them, because otherwise we'll end up with everything becoming illegal. And that's just madness.
Absolutely. And it's not just about bureaucracy, but also about taxes. Germany has the highest taxes among all Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries. So an average German employee works for the state for half the year or even longer. You have to imagine that with taxes plus social security, it means you work more than half the year for this non-functioning state. Because the state does not provide vital conditions for people, meaning it does not ensure safety. That's why we have a rapid increase in criminal offenses. It doesn't care about education. In our education system, we still have the same crazy leftist socialist program. Young people don't learn anything in school, in university, and so on. They just study gender studies and that's it. Yes and no, kind of.
I got the impression that Germany had a pretty good education system, but it was pretty strict with gymnasiums and other things like that. At least that's how it used to be. So it seems like that's the case. The virus of the awakened mind has seriously infected Germany.
So you have the International Program for International Student Assessment Testing Standard, right? I mean, the Program for International Student Assessment Studies. Germany, just like a couple of years ago, was doing fine, scoring points, but now we've just fallen because the study showed that young people are not able to do math, speak, or write properly in German. And in some states of Germany, imagine that, they simply canceled grades for essays in order to get a grade for language, right? So you no longer need to write correctly because our entire education system is deteriorating. And that's also a reason. For example, why do young people vote for us? Because they want to have a proper education and want to bring back the right education system that would give young people opportunities. And that's also the reason why So my personal opinion is that we should return to a merit-based system, right? So we need to return to a merit-based reward system and get rid of all these socialist gender things in our education system. Families and parents should be responsible for their children, and schools and universities are obligated to provide a good education, not all this trendy socialist gender nonsense.
Of course not. The main reason for going to school is to gain useful skills for life, be productive, and understand the world.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not a school, just a propaganda institution.
Right?
Yes, well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see, we need to, right?
So maybe I can continue because I was just giving an example of the education system where the government is failing. Because since in our state the government collected a record high income tax last year, they collected about 1 trillion euros exactly. So that's a record high tax. But the government can't manage taxpayers' money. And what do? They just throw money out the window, for example, on immigration into our social system. So since 2015, just to give you some numbers, and also the audience, to have an idea of what's happening here, in Germany, we had an influx of almost 7 million people, but that's the officially counted number.
Yes, 7 million people.
7 million people have come in since 2015, officially counted. And then, because people, they're just another interesting number. Our countries allow people to throw away their passports before they cross our borders, which are neither guarded nor controlled. So 57, almost 60 people arriving in our country through the open border are throwing away their documents. Why are they doing this? Because once they enter our ridiculous country with this ridiculous immigration policy, they can no longer be deported. That's the whole reason. That's why our state, our government, just like Angela Merkel's government and the last government, have declared a policy that anyone can choose to cross our border and migrate into our social welfare system. And then they can't be deported because they threw away their passport. I mean, how crazy is that?
It's really crazy, but that's exactly what happened in the United States.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, there's this extremely left-wing agenda that's being pushed everywhere in Western civilization, everywhere they can reach. Because exactly the same thing was done in the United States, where now they kind of call people illegal immigrants. They call them undocumented. And the reason they're undocumented is because they threw away their passport. On the Mexican side of the United States border, there's actually a huge pile of discarded passports and driver's licenses. It's incredible because actually it's worse to arrive with a passport than to arrive without one. And then, just like in Germany, the democratic government allocates huge amounts of money and provides support to those they call undocumented. But if they don't have documents, we have no idea if they're murderers, rapists, we don't know, because they don't have documents and we can't determine that. And as a result, there's a massive influx of criminals in the United States because honestly, I wonder, why do criminals take so long to come here? I mean, that's the conversation. America is a target-rich environment. It's so easy to steal things in wealthy areas in America. The only thing that will slow down the stealing process is a sore back from carrying the goods. You know, it's like, because you're not a robber, you're just a moving company. So, you know, it seems like all the criminals in the world come to America permanently because it's much easier to become a career criminal in America than in other countries where there's not as much to steal.
Yes.
Crime is rising in the United States. Can I ask a question?
Yes, can I ask a question about that? I read that, for example, in California. By the way, I really regret what's happening there. It's terrible. It's really terrible to see. And yes, it's awful. But in the case of California, they just canceled prosecution for theft because you have so many cases of theft. It's true.
Right? The de facto situation in California is that thefts are almost never prosecuted. Only about 1 or 2% of theft cases are actually prosecuted. And even when a case is opened, the criminals are immediately released on bail. So essentially, theft in California is legal.
I would do the same.
It's madness.
It's madness.
Yes, recently there was a referendum in California to make theft illegal again, and actually it was very popular and it passed. Since stealing anything under $1,000 was literally legal, people could just walk into a store and take up to $1,000 at a time and walk out with whatever they wanted. And if the store owner tried to stop them, he would get arrested. So it's literally like Joker and Batman, as if the criminals are free and honest citizens are getting arrested. It's just complete madness. As I said, the people of California overwhelmingly voted to make theft illegal again. Yes, but surprisingly, the governor of California, Governor Newsom, was against making theft illegal. And you just didn't implement it, right? But what they're going to do is, even though technically it's illegal again, the far left will refuse to enforce it.
Because in order
for something to work, for laws to work, you need two things. You need a law and you need it to be enforced. And if you don't have it, I mean, this is what George Soros really understood. I mean, he's kind of a brilliant guy, but honestly, very inhumane. In my opinion, you don't really need to change the law. You just need to stop enforcing the law, and that will help. But I'm thinking about the United States, and I think even in California, people are tired of this and want change, and I think that's really true. If you ask why people are wondering why Donald Trump won, and it wasn't just a small victory in the United States elections. This year, President Trump won the Electoral College. He also won the popular vote, getting the majority of votes, and the House of Representatives is Republican and the Senate is Republican. This shows that the American people are demanding change, to put it bluntly. And I recommend that the people of Germany do the same. If you are not satisfied with the current situation, you should vote for change. That's why I strongly recommend that people vote for Alternative for Germany. That's my strong recommendation, and I believe it's simply a reasonable step. I think Alice Biddle is a very reasonable person, and hopefully people can understand from this conversation that nothing outrageous is being proposed, just common sense. So actually, as I've already said publicly, I think only Alternative for Germany can save Germany. And I just want to be absolutely clear on this point. Only Alternative for Germany can save Germany, period. People really need to support Alternative for Germany. Otherwise, the situation in Germany will become very, very bad.
Yes, because as you said correctly, passing a law and enforcing it are different. That's why now in Germany there's a situation where on one hand you have the AfD and on the other the so-called unity parties. That's right, a single party made up of all the others, because they stick together and no matter what they say, they're not able to keep the promises they make in every election. Especially Angela Merkel's party. You know that she is the candidate for chancellor, right? So my candidate is from the Democratic Party of Crisa, which, for example, The Economist magazine mistakenly calls a center-right party. In my opinion, it's a left-wing Green party, but anyway, Angela Merkel is the first Green chancellor in our country. So he did what by the way, he was just talking about interference. Let me just take a look. Here, he called your interests, that is, your interest in German politics, intrusive and presumptuous. And yes.
What are your thoughts on George Soros?
Yes, exactly, and about Billy Gates. So there wasn't.
Yes.
The problem when Bill Gates tried to sell his mRNA vaccination without mentioning all the huge side effects for people's health. And no one takes responsibility for it. And all this bluff and fraud with wearing masks, right? So it's unbelievable. And also, the Democratic candidate Chris Friedrich Merz warned the world about the consequences of voting for Donald Trump in October of last year. So for now, we're talking about foreign interference, right? Exactly. So it's incredible. It's really incredible, just like how Donald Trump was treated by the German media and German politicians during his election campaign. And I already mentioned this in an interview with Bloomberg. It physically hurt me to see him being humiliated, as well as his whole family. And so, yes, that's why I really feel sorry for these people, just like, yes, they say negative things. And now.
Yes.
While we're talking, 150 European Union bureaucrats are watching us, watching our conversation. To enforce this ridiculous Digital Services Act, which is nothing more than censorship of free speech. But free speech, right? That's what it is. And you said that free speech is a prerequisite for democracy if you can't form the right opinion and exchange views and ideas. Democracy should be a contest of the best ideas, and that's how it is.
Absolutely, yes, that's exactly right. Without freedom of speech, people obviously can't say what they want to say, and then they won't be able to make an informed vote. If people are just fed propaganda and don't have access to what's really going on, then they can't vote consciously, and you don't have real democracy. That's why I say that freedom of speech is the foundation of democracy. For people to be able to vote consciously, there must be freedom of speech. It's very important. And you can say that it's actually very easy to tell who the bad guys are. For example, those who want to shut down freedom of speech and who are not the bad guys. It's very clear.
And you know what Adolf Hitler did? The first thing he did was shut down freedom of speech so he could control the media. And without that, he never would have succeeded.
Yes, exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yes, no, exactly. That's right. One of the first things he did was take control of the media and enforce strict censorship. And in fact, he tried to shut down all pro-Semitic media. Anything pro-Semitic or defending the Jewish people was shut down. So those who want censorship, I think, should be careful what they wish for, Because if you introduce censorship, it's only a matter of time before that censorship is turned against you, and eventually censorship will be used against you, and that's the danger. Because people love to censor. They continue to censor what they disagree with, but they don't realize that one day this censorship will be successfully turned against them. Of course, you mentioned, well, Hitler and all that. Many media outlets try to depict the alternative for Germany as a far-right group linked to Nazism. Maybe you could address this issue because, when people see something like a right-wing movement in Germany, they naturally have a bit of a negative reaction.
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, since I'm an economist, I would like to shed some light on the idea when we talk about Hitler, on the idea of the National Socialists. Back then, during the Third Reich, the National Socialists, as the word itself suggests, were socialists. Adolf Hitler is considered, yes,
To nationalize the industries that create.
yes, absolutely. He was a communist and considered himself a socialist. And what they did, yes, they financed the state and then private companies, and then they asked for taxes, huge taxes. And then, wait a second, to ask for a word that's about to be said to begin with. Yes, to nationalize the industry. You already mentioned that, and that's the biggest success. The biggest success after that terrible era in our history was labeling Adolf Hitler as right-wing and conservative. He was the complete opposite. He wasn't a conservative. He wasn't a libertarian. He was a communist socialist. So that's it. No more comments on this topic. And for us, it's exactly the opposite. Yes, we are a libertarian conservative party, and we see it that way. Look at it now during the discussion of this terrible HAMAS attack on Israel. And only the left-wing Palestinians criticize the local policy. So you have deeply rooted anti-Semitism within the leftist movement, and it's always been like that. Why? And Adolf Hitler also played on this. He played on people's envy and airplanes lane. Jews were highly educated, very cultured, and they were successful. There were wealthy people in Germany at that time, and then he incited the envy of the population toward these people. And it was a socialist measure taken against them. Look at Stalin, look at the Soviet Union. Under Stalin, it was the same thing. So he was nothing but a socialist anti-Semite, and we are the complete opposite. We are a libertarian conservative party. We are constantly misrepresented, and we would like to free people from the state. I want to have independently thinking people, confident people. I would like the state to be minimized, reduced to its functions, and for people to have freedom of speech, freedom of wealth, for example, to generate wealth. With these disgustingly high taxes, the state undermines the foundation of wealth, right? So people can't accumulate wealth that makes them independent from the state. Thank you. So I would like to have independently thinking, well-educated people who can freely form their own opinions. I want Germany to have strong leaders. I don't want to have stupid, weak leaders like we've had in the past couple of years, because such people cannot think rationally. And they pose a great danger. Look at the war in Ukraine. They pose a great danger to our national security and to all of European security as well. This is also my hope for Donald Trump and for you, for your administration, that you will stop this terrible war, this pointless loss of young lives every day as soon as possible. Because the Europeans, they have actually given up everything, a good army, good negotiating power. They are completely dependent on the United States in the sense that the United States has to do all the work. We don't need to do anything. We just escalate the whole conflict against Russia. What is happening here is very dangerous, and only you can stop it.
I think that President Trump, he will resolve this conflict, I think, very quickly. As you noted, it has been at a stalemate for several years, and all that has happened over the past few years is hundreds of thousands of deaths, but with no result. The longer this conflict lasts, the weaker Ukraine gets compared to Russia, since Ukraine is much smaller and can't sustain such losses like Russia can. Russia can, you see, that's one of the blows. People are dying for nothing. Why? That's why I hope this terrible conflict can be resolved quickly, and I think it will happen under President Trump. Yes.
That would be wonderful because these are our people. Here, many people are worried and they are concerned for a very good reason, I think, because this conflict could escalate to a nuclear exchange. And here, the European governments have no measure, no strategy, no red line, no storyline, no foreign or security policy of their own towards Russia and Ukraine. They have no strategy to put an end to this, and they have no military power. That's why they've been underfunding the NATO budget for decades, for a very long time. On average, for example, Germany, because the share of gross domestic product should be 2, and Germany on average, I think, is just over 1. So Germany hasn't contributed its share, but Germany as well. We don't take care of the defenders of our own country, so that's the second point. So we're completely dependent on the United States. But I think, and I listened to a very interesting speech by James David Vance. He said he doesn't want to have client states, right? Yes, he wants to have independent states that also form their own independent opinions about things, right? So you, for example, in your companies, you don't want to be surrounded by people and mediocrity either, right? Me neither. That's why I try.
No, definitely not.
I also try to have the best people on my team, and these best people should criticize me every day. And I don't want to have people around me who just say, yes, that's right, because you can't learn and you don't have the opportunity to correct mistakes.
Sorry, I just said yes.
Yeah. People, well, it's so important. Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for my companies like SpaceX and Tesla, we're constantly looking for critical feedback because if we make a mistake, the rockets will explode and the cars won't work. Yeah, so, physics is very unforgiving. I say like really physics is the law and everything else is just kind of because I've seen people break any law, but I've never seen them break the laws of physics. And that's why if you don't design the rocket and its operation exactly right, and if even one thing is wrong, the rocket will explode. Yes, so that's why I really believe in the need to seek out critical feedback. And in general, I think that critical feedback should be seen as a gift.
Yes.
Absolutely, definitely. Yes.
No, I'm just continuing the topic. So if you don't have that feedback, your rocket could explode, right? But here, in this critical phase of this terrible war in Ukraine, many people could die because of this foolish policy that was adopted.
People died. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So let's touch on some potentially possible questions that people might consider as hot buttons. For example, what are your views on Israel? Thank you.
It's all very complicated.
The more, no.
No, really, like the more I read about the Middle East and the situation in Israel, the more complicated everything gets. And honestly, I wanted to ask you about a potential solution because, to be honest, in my humble opinion, I don't see a solution. So maybe Israel needs to find some alliances with Sunni states if that's possible. And yes, honestly, from my point of view, it's a very complicated situation. And I don't know, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not a politician. If you're asking what I'm doing, all this blah, 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 I'm really saying what I think in order to practice honest politics. Honestly, I don't know. To be completely honest, I don't know how to resolve the conflict at this moment. And I hope you have an answer to this question. I'm sorry for my dissatisfaction, but it's difficult, and I want to give a reasonable answer. Honestly, I don't know how to resolve the conflict in Israel.
Maybe it can be said differently. You fully support Israel's existence.
Yes, of course.
All right, that's what people want. Absolutely. Over time, I ask questions that may seem obvious, but no.
There aren't, yes. Oh, now I see why the question arose. No, absolutely. We must protect Israel's existence. And we need to protect not only the existence of the state of Israel. I also think that Benjamin Netanyahu has made a lot of mistakes in the past, to be honest. But we also have to take responsibility as the German nation state to protect Jewish life, Jewish people in our country who are now facing Muslim crime, right? So they are no longer safe here. I don't know if you've seen the videos from the streets of Berlin. I'm in my office in Berlin, but with all these Palestinian demonstrations here, well, a Jew can no longer walk down the street, right? And we have a huge potential for anti-Semitic crimes against the Jewish people. And to be very frank, that's not the case. Is the only defender, and I say this very frankly, Alternative for Germany is the only, maybe the only defender of the Jewish people here in Germany. Because the party members, all the other parties, they did exactly the opposite. Yes, they let millions of people into the country. They allow them to commit crimes on our streets, and the crime rate is rapidly rising. And that's why the Jewish people are leaving our country. When I talk to my Jewish friends living in Germany, Switzerland, France, and Austria, they were very scared after the Hamas attack on October 7th because they were afraid that they could be attacked by Palestinians, Hamas supporters, or Antifa, or left-wing terrorists, I don't know, but they were very scared, very afraid to go out on the streets. And we stood up to protect these people. Although the mainstream media claims otherwise, that's not true. It's just a lie from our party.
I wanted to convey that the alternative for Germany is being heavily misrepresented, especially by Western media. So yes, and I'll say that I strongly support the state of Israel, but I also think we should remember and sympathize with the civilians who are also dying. When I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think they mostly agree. That is, there are 3 steps that mean there is no other choice but to eliminate those who want to destroy the state of Israel. Well, you understand the Mossad, basically. Next, education must be reformed so Palestinians aren't raised with hatred or a desire for Israel's destruction. The education and media systems need improvement. And the third thing, which is also very important, is to make the Palestinian areas prosperous. This third step is very important, and it is perhaps the most difficult step. You have to take this third step, you have to bring prosperity, you have to help with reconstruction, and you have to ensure prosperity. I've discussed this with many people in Israel and said the third step is crucial.
That's true.
They asked me, when did this work? I said, I'll give you a big example. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles was extremely unfair to Germany, and this caused a huge amount of discontent. And the Treaty of Versailles laid the foundation for extraordinary reparations and set the stage for World War II. Without the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler would not have succeeded. Yes, that's true, but if you look, the lesson was learned. So, after World War II, when Germany and Japan were defeated, the United States actually helped to rebuild Japan and Germany by providing financial support for the recovery of Japan and Germany. Japan and Germany are now allies. And this is a very important and fundamental lesson of history.
You're absolutely right. After the Hamas attack, I just opened Google Maps to see what the geographical situation is there. And when you see the Gaza Strip, it really is a strip of Gaza that is simply blocked off, without any resources, and even without water. So the water supply can be cut off, and other supplies can simply be stopped instantly. And this construction as well, just looking at it from a geographical point of view, you don't have to be very smart to understand that nothing will come of this, and that taking concrete measures to make this region prosperous is a very important first step.
Right, yes, I think it's necessary. To do this, you must overcome the natural human instinct for reciprocity, which is essentially an eye for an eye. The issue with an eye for an eye is that, as the saying goes, it eventually leaves everyone blind. That's why I believe there's great wisdom in forgiveness. You need strength and forgiveness, but it's the only way to stop the endless cycle of violence.
That's a very beautiful phrase, like an eye for an eye makes everyone blind.
Yes, exactly. So subtitles, yes, I hope that's the future. That's the best future I can think of. I don't think there's any other future that works. So,
can I ask you another question? Because we just switched to another topic. What's your point of view? So we left off with your administration ending the war in Ukraine very quickly. But what's your point of view on the tools and measures that can be taken? Would you like to talk about this? Could you tell us a little about what we can expect?
yes, well, to be honest, I mean, it depends on President Trump. You know, he is the commander in chief. So it really, depends on him. So I don't want to speak for him. But I think there is a path to a solution here, and for that, strong leadership from the United States is necessary. Yes, but I'm confident it can be done.
Yes, and I think
that peace in the Middle East is also possible. It is possible, and I think it would be a wonderful future for the whole world.
no, not wonderful. So that's absolutely fair. So it's very, very good for me.
Let's see if there are any other topics we should discuss. Or do you have any questions for me, or what? Yes, absolutely.
Because I want to ask, and many people are interested in this. So why do you think that flying to Mars and colonizing Mars is your top priority for SpaceX? And when do you think you'll be ready? A human expedition to Mars? If you don't mind, if I may ask this question, because everyone is interested, so these are great projects, right?
Yes, well, I mean, I think at a very high level, I think what set of actions will lead to the long-term prosperity of civilization? Well, the growth of the scale and reach of consciousness. As far as we know, we're searching for the only place with life, or at least intelligent life in any form. Many people think that there must be aliens, but I haven't seen any evidence of the existence of aliens. If the archaeological data is accurate, Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but civilizations, starting with the first writing, are only about 5,000 years old, around 1/1,000,000th of Earth's age. Human civilization has only been a brief moment so far. And that's why we have to ask, what steps can we take to ensure the long-term survival of the site, life as we know it? If we become a multiplanetary species, consciousness will likely last much longer than if we remain on one planet. Subtitles. That doesn't mean I think Earth is about to perish or anything like that, but there is a certain risk if a global thermonuclear war happens, or some kind of extreme natural event like a giant meteorite hitting Earth, which would cause a mass extinction. And if we look at the fossil record, there are at least 5 extreme mass extinction events that would have wiped out all of humanity completely. There are at least 5 of them. So I think we should take advantage of this opportunity today, because for the first time in 4.5 billion years of Earth's history, there is a chance to extend life and expand consciousness beyond Earth. And this window of opportunity may be open for a short time, or it may be open for a long time, but in the case that it's open for only a short time, we should use this opportunity to become a multiplanetary species quickly and ensure civilization's survival.
So what is your timeline for the expedition, for example, for the first human expedition?
Yes, to be clear, it's not so much about flags and footprints as it is about creating a self-sustaining city on Mars, where the critical threshold is that the city can grow independently from Earth. That is, if resupply from Earth stops for any reason, this colony on Mars won't die out. If we can reach that point, then we will have passed one of the very important and fundamental Fermi filters. There is this idea, why don't we see evidence of intelligent life? So this is the idea that there are various great filters that civilizations never pass, and one of these great filters is that they never go beyond their home planet. So if we can pass the Fermi filter as a single planet species, and if we remain a single planet species, then our destruction is only a matter of time. You can argue about how long it will take, but eventually something will happen that will destroy the civilization. Although it may occur far in the future, fossils show there have been at least 5 mass natural extinctions, as I mentioned. And I think there's an additional risk for humans that we might destroy ourselves. Because dinosaurs didn't have thermonuclear weapons, dinosaurs, and they also didn't have spaceships, so we have the risk of thermonuclear war, which could wipe everyone out, but we also have spaceships, which can make life multiplanetary. And so, to answer your question more directly, I think we will be able to send a starship to Mars without a crew. In about 2 years, Earth and Mars approach each other. For planetary transfer, about every 2 years, every 26 years and 2 years. Yes, so obviously it takes Earth a year to go around the sun, and it takes Mars about 2 years. And obviously you can't fly to Mars if it's on the other side of the sun from Earth. Yes, so we need to wait until Mars is in the same solar system quadrant as Earth. And this happens for about 6 months every 2 years. And the optimal transfer window usually lasts only a few months. So for a few months, every 2 years or every 26 months, you can travel to Mars. So, right now there is a transfer window to Mars, and that means the next one will be in 2 years, and 2 years after that there will be another one. So within 2 years, I think we can send unmanned starships to Mars to check if the landing systems are working properly. We want to make sure we don't add new craters to Mars. It should be 0. And once we prove that the landing is safe, then if all the ships we send in about 2 years land safely, and we think we understand the problems, then, in principle, in about 4 years, we could send the first people. And then the number of ships could grow exponentially. From this point, I mean, by my estimates, we need to deliver about 1 million tons in cargo to Mars to make it self-sustaining. When everything is very uncertain, I think if you can guess even within one order of magnitude, you're doing pretty well. I suspect 100,000 tons may be too little, but hopefully we won't need 10 million. That's why I believe 1 million tons should make Mars self-sustaining. So it might be 1 million tons of cargo to the surface of Mars and about 1 million people or more. That's what's really important. The critical threshold in terms of the fundamental branching of the future of civilization is the one point of reaching Mars when Mars can grow on its own, even if supply ships from Earth stop coming. At that moment, the future of civilization branches out, and in a good way, the continuation of WoW and the probable lifespan of civilization increases dramatically. Yes, and I suppose that there will be cases when future Martians really will come and help and save us when an emergency arises. But not in the same way that America helped save the rest of the world during the First and Second World Wars and continued during the Cold War. And where would the world be if America hadn't helped in those 3 circumstances? So I think there's every chance that Mars will help save Earth at some point in the future, maybe many times. And then when we have a civilization on Mars, we can spread it to the rest of the solar system, to larger asteroids like Ceres, maybe the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and further, at least throughout the rest of the solar system. And then we will turn from, hopefully, a multiplanetary civilization into a multistellar one and live among the stars. Then we will be able to try to figure out what the nature of the universe is. Maybe when we visit those distant exploring star systems, we'll find remnants of ancient alien civilizations. That would be very interesting and would improve our understanding of the universe. Dramatic, absolutely, yes, the timescales are just mind-boggling. I mean, according to physics, the age of the universe is about 13.8 billion years. And I mean, even the elements in our bodies that aren't hydrogen, like all the heavier elements, must have formed in the center of a star. And so most of our bodies were formed in the center of a star. And that star exploded, and then the elements recondensed eventually billions of years later to form the Earth and people. So if you think about such timescales, they're really mind-blowing. But a civilization that lasted 1 million years. So I think a good metric to say when a civilization actually became a civilization is probably writing. If I had to pick one, I'd choose that. That's only 5,000 years ago. So civilizations, as I said, last 1 million years, an incredibly long time compared to the duration of human civilization, but it's very little compared to the age of the universe. Adding 1 million years requires using 3 decimal places compared to 13.8 billion years. That's why I believe that when we explore these star systems, we'll discover alien civilizations that may have existed millions of years longer than us. And I think that any civilization that lasts 1 million years would make it into the Hall of Fame. That's an incredibly long time, an extended period. So, in any case, I think humanity doesn't want to be one of those miserable one-planet civilizations. As you know, any self-respecting civilization should have at least 2 planets. That's what we should aim for.
And if you just said that the human body is made up of elements that were exploded and then rearranged, right? So do you think this happened by chance, or do you believe in God? I'm just curious because a lot of people say, well, this can't be a coincidence, right? So it could be God, right? Do you believe in God?
Well, I'm willing to believe in things in proportion to the information I receive. So I guess I have a physical view of reality. I mean, well, I try to understand the universe as much as possible to figure out what's going on. I'm certainly open to the idea of God, and if you ask, for example, well, where did the universe come from? How was it created? I suppose there is some entity that could be called God, I don't know, but that's a separate question from, say, whether there is some entity that watches our everyday actions and passes moral judgment on what we do day to day. It seems that this is not the case because, there are some very evil things happening in the world, and if someone is constantly watching us from a moral standpoint, it seems strange that some very evil things are not prevented. But maybe that's the case, I don't know. I just try to form my opinion based on what I learn, and as I learn more, if I change my views according to what I've learned.
Yeah, it's the same here. And honestly, I'm still searching. I don't know what to believe. That's called being agnostic. It's interesting to see how both the world and universe have developed. And yes, it was incredibly interesting to hear about your visions. And yes, it's quite an interesting perspective for each of us.
Yes, I would say that I have a philosophy of curiosity, meaning I'm curious about the nature of the universe, and I would say that I follow the philosophical school of Douglas Adams, which was described in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In that book, Earth was kind of like a giant computer that was trying to answer the question, what is the meaning of life? And so it comes back with 4042, but what does 42 mean? And that's fine. Actually, the answer is the easy part, but the question is the hard part. So, that was quite enlightening for me because when I was 12 or 13, I went through an existential crisis about the meaning of life. And, I read a lot of religious texts and books on philosophy. It's like reading Chopin, Arnesia, and things like that, which is a bit depressing if you read it as a child. But in the end, why? They're a bit negative, so sometimes, it actually makes more sense to read them as an adult. But then I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is actually a book about philosophy in the form of humor. And I think that's really what struck me as very insightful. We should try to understand the nature of the universe and essentially even figure out what questions to ask about the answer, which is the universe. And this led me to the conclusion that we should strive to expand the boundaries and scope of consciousness so that we can better know what questions to ask about nature, about the answer, which is the universe. Therefore, it seems we should simply take those actions that lead to greater understanding of the universe.
Wonderful, actually. Those are perfect final words, to be honest, for a conversation, because right now I don't know what to continue. Because these words are so beautiful. So I just want to ruin everything. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful talking to you, hearing your views on humanity and having an idea of your vision. It's prophetic. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
It was great talking to you, and I hope others find this conversation useful. All right, thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, Elon.